2020 school board meeting to order and say happy birthday to my sister. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Anita, I see you are on. Would you like to do the roll call? Feels like I am echoing. Am I echoing out there to you guys?
I think I just fixed it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't hear it.
Cheryl Hancock.
Here?
I am here. Chris Lau.
Here.
Rebecca Reaver. Here. Barb Wetstein. Here. Brian Wolpatt.
Here.
Trenton David Hughesman.
I know he said he's going to be a little late, but he is joining us.
And Gary Dunlap.
Here.
Okay, so with 7 of the 7 school board members present, I would declare a quorum. I would note that the agenda has been published, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes to the agenda at this time? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So move.
Gary, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris, any discussion? Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then public participation. I don't have anyone here who is interested, don't have a card. So we will move on to the next item, recognition and thank you. Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, this evening I have 2 recognition and thank yous I'd like to mention. The first one is I'd like to thank the La Crosse Community Foundation for the organization's recent donation and grant awarded to the School District of Holmen. They donated $1,310 from the gym's grocery bag fund to assist our food pantries. And then they also awarded $4,500 in grant dollars to our high school National Honor Society to purchase document cameras so the National Honor Society students can tutor and mentor freshmen during virtual learning. So we're excited that we have staff to initiate a grant such as that, and then for the La Crosse Community Foundation to grant that to us during these times. So thank you, La Crosse Community Foundation, for their continued support.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
They,
And then I have one other one.
Yeah.
The America Farmers Grows Communities donated $2,500 to the high school FFA program on behalf of the La Crosse County farmer Karen Hauser. So Ms. Hauser selected our district to receive the donation through the Grow Communities program, which partners with farmers to make a positive impact in farm communities by supporting local nonprofit organizations. So, you know, during these times, we are just so fortunate in that we have community members and those people like Karen Hauser step up and support our programs yet. So thank you.
Thank you. It is nice to see those, the La Crosse Community Foundation. I know that they have, a few months ago, established that fund, and so I was so glad to see that they recognize education would need some of those monies as well. And they've kind of expanded their scope. They used to be more supportive of programs and projects right in the greater La Crosse area, but to branch out and support us in Holmen, we really appreciate that. So good stuff happening. And the American Farmers Grow, that's a really neat grant as well, really neat program. So thank you for sharing that. Then moving on to reports and discussion, the 2021-22 budget. Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, so each year we come to you. This is something that is on a cycle for part of our budget development process, and it's the criteria for funding determination. So what is our criteria for funding determination all about? Well, what it is it helps us in making decisions as to where and how we're going to spend money. We have never experienced a budget where we've had more money available than needed. So what this is for is to fund those un- and underfunded needs that aren't able to be funded within our budget that is allocated for the, it would be for the 2021 budget year. And as a result, every budget includes difficult choices, so we like to have criteria that helps us in guiding what do we choose if we do have funds available. And it just really helps us in how our money will be spent.
Okay.
I'm going to keep on moving here.
Yep.
So this slide basically just shows that, the board did approve our event for our budget development calendar. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that this year, what's taking place tonight, instead of on 8/24, is we are just one board meeting behind in this process, and part of that is just due to some of the different budgetary pieces happening this year in the circumstances we are living. So we'll be bringing forward, coming up after this, our un- and underfunded needs lists, like we do every year, which sometimes would be this meeting will be at the next board meeting, and so forth. Okay. So as you see, we always want to bring how we want to determine our criteria for funding to the board for review and input, and that's what I am doing this evening. So how we want to go forward with that is this slide shows the district's strategic plan. The strategic plan will guide us in our decision-making process for determining funding. We want to ensure our decision aligns with this strategic plan. We want to make sure that it aligns with our vision of belong, serve, succeed, with our mission, prepare students for tomorrow through an engaging and inclusive educational community today, and it aligns with our values, which are empowerment, equity, excellence, integrity, and safety. This should be a familiar site for most of you now. This is our district dashboard that we have developed and have been maintaining. And the administrative proposal is to continue to use this dashboard as a means to make decisions on what needs to receive first consideration for funding. The dashboard allows us to survey a funding request to see the impact across the organization. This is important because we don't want one decision to negatively impact other decisions. So administration is proposing to use the dashboard with the strategic plan guiding us as a means to improving our effectiveness of our funding allocations. So what we do is we use these 39 key performance measures, and we assess them and categorize them as, will the request that is being requested for funding improve the area, or the key performance indicator, will it not change, or will it diminish the performance of that measure? So we go through and do that analysis with each request. And then those that would most greatly improve across all of the whole dashboard, we rank those in an order, and then I bring them before the board. So we are basically proposing to move forward with how we have been creating our un- and underfunded needs ranking list, along with using our new strategic plan to guide us. So any questions or input on the budget development process?
Any questions? Yes, Barb.
So just Dr. Mueller, could you explain just how, I remember vaguely the discussion on equity before and how it's interwoven within the dashboard. Would you just speak to that a bit for us, please?
Yeah, so when we look at the areas within the dashboard, for example, one of them is around our achievement in, say, literacy. In that, what we'll do to be looking at the equity piece is we can break that down by our different subgroups at this point in time, which we do within our buildings, and take a look at, okay, not only is this the overall indicator on our district dashboard, but it is broken down within our school buildings, within subcategories, and taken a look at. But we will be working, as we start to develop our district equity framework, be looking at how do we include equity into these focus areas and into all these areas to ensure that that is a part of our decision making. So this year within it, we know equity is definitely a core value. We know inclusion is within our mission, and we know to belong is part of our vision. So that will definitely guide us in the ranking process. As far as quantitative measures, that would be more within our dashboard measures that be developed more thoroughly over time. So Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so very much. Then moving on to the big item of the evening, the COVID-19 risk level assessment metrics. Dr. Mueller.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start out and then I'll ask some people to join me partway through the presentation. So, this evening, I'm bringing before you how we are going to assess the risk level of COVID-19 within the School District of Holmen. So we know the 2021 school year during the COVID-19 pandemic brings a unique set of challenges. Ensuring the safety of our students is key to furthering their education. We recognize the immense challenges. There is no perfect plan to return to school safely, and there is no one-size-fits-all strategy that works for every school. What we do know is we will be adapting a model from the Harvard Global Health Institute on guidance for schools. The model suggests taking multiple factors into consideration. And the Cooley COVID-19 Collaborative, which is our group that works out of La Crosse County, also uses guidance from the Harvard model and has been a part of the development of our model, which I will be sharing with you tonight. So, as you can see, Gunderson, Mayo, and La Crosse County Health Department is up there along with our Harvard model. The Gunderson, Mayo, and La Crosse County, along with some business leaders and others, make up the Cooley COVID Collaborative. Just that's why those are up there. Okay. So a little bit about the Harvard Global Health Institute. They are a research-based institute for human health. They actually that's one of their specialty areas of research. They are dedicated to finding ways to bring students back safely as the virus continues to spread across our nation. Their guidance helps to devise a plan based on the size of the outbreak in our community, which is La Crosse County area, which means their philosophy is schools need to devise a plan to safely bringing back students, because children are at risk either way. If they go to school, they may get sick and a new outbreak may spike. If they don't, they miss out in-person learning, which play an essential role in supporting the mental and social-emotional well-being of our students. The Harvard model gives guidance on how to balance the risk level of the virus with strategies that may be implemented to reduce the risk for a return under certain conditions. So, opening is based on resources that we have available. The scientific evidence that is used through the Harvard model indicates that risks to students and staff can be kept low if schools adhere to strict control measures and dynamically respond to potential outbreaks. But we need to ensure we have the resources. So that's another part of it. And lastly, the Harvard model suggests on how we should return to school, and it should be based on prioritization. The Harvard model suggests that we should start with our youngest learners, and then those with specialized services first, and then move to our older learners. This strategy may be used depending on the risk level of the virus. So that's a little bit background about the Harvard Global Health Institute. And the metrics that the La Crosse County COVID-19 Collaborative are using are based off of the Harvard Global Institute also, and the DHS. They're using that to guide their metrics. So that was another reason of the choice to move this direction, is that alignment. So the factors that they talk about that are important to consider determining the return for school for students are not just one, but they're many. So they include the actual COVID-19 risk level, which tells us about the amount of transmission happening in the community or happening around with the virus. The other is mitigation strategies that have been implemented. Are you able to put those in place? That's another factor to consider. Then, have staff had sufficient training? They ensure, you want to make sure your staff are trained in the new types of protocols that are needed. And what's the accessibility to resources? And lastly, what is the availability of the needed resources such as PPE? So I'll go into a little detail of each of these now. So you've probably heard about our mitigation strategies more than once now, but just to refresh, these are the following mitigation strategies that are suggested through the Harvard model be implemented as part of your building plans. So we have a symptom monitoring process in place to track staff and student symptoms to allow for the proper follow-up. We have required face mask coverings for all staff, students, and visitors in the School District of Holmen. Physical distancing will be implemented by classroom arrangements, staggered arrival departure times, student cohorting, and as weather permits, increased use of outdoor space. You will also see markings throughout the building to encourage the 6 feet of distancing in more public areas. Hand washing protocols are in place with additional hand sanitation stations around the buildings. And then keeping students in cohort groups to limit the possibility of outbreak. So the size of your cohorts is another mitigation strategy. And then plexiglass barriers to prevent the risk of spread within the more high traveled areas is recommended, or depending on which types of settings that you are learning is happening in with students and staff. And then increased frequency and additional disinfection of all hard surfaces and touch points on a daily basis, along with deep cleanses on a nightly basis. So those are all the mitigation strategies that the Harvard model recommends you must have in place and have a plan for before you were to return to school. And then staff training. Staff have now had time to complete training on many of the new protocols. So these are the 4 staff trainings that have been delivered and put together by Mr. Myers, basically our safety coordinator is another title of his in the district. And anytime we have someone new come in or have a sub, they have worked with them to ensure that they can get the training needed. Now, accessibility of resources. Based on the Harvard model, when determining the mode of learning, so is it virtual, a hybrid, or in person, the resources available should be taken into consideration. Now, this is why not every district or school may return at the same time or in the same mode of learning. The return and type must take into consideration the building capacity. How many square feet in large spaces are we able to physically distance students appropriately? So that's one thing we have to take into consideration. In the School District of Holmen, we have many more students than we have in some of our surrounding districts to the north or west, east of us. Staff capacity. Do we have enough staff to have correct cohort sizes, or enough staff, or are enough staff healthy and present to have learning? So there could be a time in the year where we have so many staff that may have to quarantine, and we're going to have to look at it and say, do we have enough resources to remain open? Do we have teachers that are able to keep teaching, and so forth? Cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. Do we have enough personnel and supplies available to do a deep cleaning nightly? And then process for symptomatic identification of when we have a symptomatic student or staff. Is there enough capacity and the tools needed to provide fast, efficient response to symptomatic staff and students, and also provide follow-up? Contact tracing. Yes, we do that in the School District of Holmen, and it is a timely, very time-consuming job. So it's something new that we have to do, and that's one of the mitigation strategies to stopping the spread as quick as possible if that's, if you have a positive case and you need to identify that. So having those resources and time to follow up. And then health services, resources, and contact. Enough staffing to provide adequate health services for the possible increased demand. So we have to really ensure we have the accessibility of these resources. And then lastly here, ensuring we have the proper protective gear for staff. Initially, when the year had started, there was a wait time for receiving PPE. It was prioritized for our healthcare systems. We have been receiving PPE, but it still has been challenging to keep receiving our supplies consistently. And what I have learned is when we go to place an order, sometimes we have to go to multiple vendors to finally find one so that we can get in the proper PPE. So as we go through this, the equipment that we're using to stay safe, we have to make sure our supply we have the supply that may meet the demand. So those are some factors that we are considering to make sure that we can have a safe return to school. Then, I saved this one for last because this one will take a little more time. So then there is also, lastly, the monitoring the risk level of the virus in our community. This chart is one part of the decision process. These metrics are going to help guide the district in determining what is the proper mode of learning. As previously mentioned, a multiple measure approach will be used, not one individual measure. But as you can see here on the chart, all these will be taken into consideration, but this first measure here, the CDC community spread designation, what that is for, that directly comes from the CDC website. It just designates the total number of cases in our county. This is an overall metric just to keep a pulse on the situation. What we're going to take into more consideration are our primary metrics, and we have 2 of them. These metrics will be monitored closely, while the secondary metrics will just assist in determining the learning mode. The 7-day case rate per 100,000, this shows the risk level based on daily positive cases per 100,000 population. It's a 7-day rolling average. This comes from the Cooley COVID-19 Collaborative site. It is metric number 1 and is updated weekly on Wednesdays. Then the other primary metric is the 7-day positive test ratio. This is also on the Cooley COVID-19 Collaborative site. It's metric number 9. It is one of the community indicators. This metric is the percentage of all coronavirus tests performed that are actually positive. A percentage could mean either the number of positive tests is too high or if the number of total tests is too low. A higher percentage positive suggests higher transmission and that there are likely more people with coronavirus in the community who haven't been tested yet. So this is important because we want to ensure good testing capacity. Then our secondary metrics, the 7-day origin. This comes under also from the Cooley COVID-19 Collaborative site under case data. It's a percentage that tells us if we are containing the spread through knowing who was contacted, or if we don't know the origin of the spread, it would be known as community transmission. Therefore, the higher percentage, the better. And lastly, the trend data will be very important because this is a great way to forecast possible future metrics. So really watching the trends of how the data is going. As I know many people are watching closely right now with the situation happening. So it was communicated previously that the current instructional model will be reassessed after 30 days to determine if the instruction will remain in a virtual format, or will it transition to a blended instructional model or return to an in-person format. Therefore, the latest date for an announcement is September 30th. Starting next week, the School District of Holmen will provide a weekly update on Wednesdays about the COVID-19 conditions taking place with all factors taking into consideration. So the status report will be updated on the district website and Facebook page. And also on Wednesday, we will also, being the first time, send an email to all families and staff showing them and directing them to the page where all that information will be updated. And with that status report, it will say, these are our conditions, these are the metrics, this is where our consideration, our factors that we talked about tonight, we'll measure them as satisfactory or unsatisfactory as far as our availability to resources, our mitigation strategies, training, and so on. and give a status report to our community in our staff. So they know where we're at and where we're going and what to expect.
Dr. Mueller, can I just
Yes.
ask, what you're saying will be shown on Wednesday is the COVID risk level metrics. Are you also going to share the status of the availability of resources?
Yeah, so what the plan is we will share the primary metrics and the secondary metrics and what those measures read, and then where are we in the red, orange, yellow, or green. And then we will have a chart that lists out it'll have mitigation strategies, staff training, accessibility of resources, and availability of PPE. And it will either be, is that satisfactory at this point in time or unsatisfactory? In other words, have our staff been trained? Do we have enough PPE right now at this point in time? Do we have enough resources and so forth?
Great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I know there's some confusion that just this risk level metric is the only thing we're looking at. And reality is we're looking at those others as well, but I think it's important we communicate the evaluation, because resources, building capacity, that probably won't change. But staff capacity might change
Yes.
because of people being sick and that kind of thing.
Very much so.
I
And it
think
can even change in the virtual mode.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I think sharing that as transparent as we can be, I think is going to be important. Because again, some people are just focusing on that risk level metric, but that's only one of a number of
Correct.
things we're looking at. So,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I move on?
Oh, I have more, but let's move on.
Okay, all right.
Unless anyone else has any on that. Okay,
Okay, so as you can see by this matrix, there are 3 possible learning modes. Virtual, what most students are currently experiencing at the current time. Hybrid, which we also have referred to as a blended model. Or in-person, which we are more familiar with, and that's usually typically how instruction has occurred in the past. You can see our 4K through 5, our elementary learners, their options are either virtual or in-person. They do not have the hybrid option. And this is based off the Harvard model because of how the prioritization as you bring your youngest learners back the soonest. So, as previously presented, in-person means school 5 days a week. In-person is, as we have previously presented in our reopening presentation. Right now, what I'm going to do is turn it over to our high school and middle school principal just to talk briefly about the blended or hybrid model. And they've started to have some conversations with their staff and just want to give an update on where that's at right now. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight and continuing this discussion kind of in an unknown world as we try and work to make plans in a rather unpredictable environment. Since we met this summer, we've obviously continued to experience change, and we're continuing to try and look at what do we think is the best model for us to return at if we were to return in a blended format. At the middle school, we've begun looking at those plans again, much like we rolled out this summer when we talked about our blended format. As we're looking at that, we are looking at a model at the middle school in which we would be dividing our grade levels in half and looking to bring them into the school building and the cohort then of students that would come in each grade level would be around 150 students. Students would be staying in their own house for most of their classes that they are having. But at the middle school, we do have some cross-housing that takes place. And what I mean by that is we do have students that might be in House M and S that might go into House H for certain classes, such as a math class, for those students that are in high math to go into that classroom with that teacher. And so we are looking at having that model where our students would be possibly crossing house in order to do that. We're also looking at, as we look at our students, we have our encore classes. We work very hard to have our students get their encore classes that they want to take and they want to be a part of. We have them scheduled in those classes right now, and so as students would be going to those classes, that would be where that cohort would again mix with those other students in that grade level. Something that we're working hard to do, and is why we are looking at splitting our grade levels in half, is what we talked about this summer, is I do believe that that will allow us the ability to provide 6 feet of social distance in our classrooms, as well as setting up procedures in our hallways with staggered release times, so that we don't have all of the students switching classes in the hallway at the same time. Right now, we're working with our teams to talk about what this can look like. Later this week, continued meetings with our team leaders at each grade level to talk about what do passing times look like then in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade. If we were to put markings in the hallway, what do you think is going to be the best markings for us to have down in those hallways in order to be a visual for our students? Another thing that we're trying to talk about is this summer we didn't have as much direction at that time on the cleaning that we would be doing in the classrooms, and so we're trying to look at what is that going to look like for the cleaning of the classrooms. Right now we have 3-minute passing periods. The QuadStat 5, the dwell time is 5 minutes. So our staff is talking about how they can get creative with getting that solution on the desks, giving it time to sit, and then giving our staff time to wash it off. This is where I've enjoyed working with my staff, is because they're much more creative than I am, and they're coming up with ideas such, could we make this, a reading time, that students are standing up, they're at their desk, but they're reading at that time while this is down. Could we look at other things like that? And so those are some of the details that we're still looking at. As we're looking at a schedule right now, we are exploring the idea of every other day for our students to be coming, but also still exploring other models as we are trying to look at how can we meet the needs of our students that are in the building, but how can we also be responsive to the needs of our students that may not be in the building due to possible exposure, possible testing positive, and making sure that we can get them information as well. And so I'm excited to continue to meet with them and talk with them about that as we figure out the time that we can provide high quality instruction to our students that are in the building, but also how we can provide the time to our staff to meet the needs of those students that are not in our building, because those are two completely different needs that it is very, very difficult to meet synonymously as in one. And so that's kind of an update as I came and sat down and hogged the microphone from Mr. Sackett. But if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those right now, or if you would like Mr. Sackett to talk about his plan, that would be fine too.
Anyone have questions? Well, so I'm curious about how are those teachers, if they've got the students in the classroom, are they also responsible then for students who are at home virtually? And how are they doing that? Or is that every other day the teachers they stay with their cohorts, and the ones that are at home have different teachers, so they will be virtual with their staff, the other staff?
I'm going to try and answer your question, and then if I don't answer it correctly, tell me that I didn't, and I'll try again, all right? If we would return to a blended format, we would no longer have students that would be learning virtually at home with us as well. We would have students that would be coming in for in-person learning, and then while students were not there for the in-person learning, then that following day, they would be at home, and they would be doing asynchronous work. So they would be following up with work that was possibly assigned by the teacher the day before, that was work that is either a review of what they had done in that classroom or a reinforcement of what they've done, or it would be foreshadowing the work that they were going to be introducing the students to the next day. So they might be doing that through Canvas, but there would not be a virtual meeting that would be taking place with the students like there is right now.
Oh, I think you answered it, so yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. It's just, I'm concerned about, they're gonna have to prep for that at-home stuff too, as well as the work they're doing in the classroom that day, so I just want to be conscious of that, so.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Could I follow up a question
Yes,
with that?
go
And
ahead.
so with teachers who have to plan for either review or activities that are to come, is there time built into the day for them to do that?
So at the middle school, all of our teachers have common prep time that is built into the schedule. And so when we come back, we will be able to run the schedule that we have at the middle school. And so, for example, our core teachers would have that block of time that they have in the morning. Our encore teachers would have that block of time that they would have at the beginning of the day. And so there is that time that is built into the schedule that they would have to do that.
But then no additional time would be given for the extra prepping that would be going into the kids that are at home?
I think my best answer to that is no. I think that what I would like to do, and this is where I need to talk and work with our staff more on, is what does that look like for those students that other day, and what is feasible to look at? Because I don't think that it is feasible to put together a whole nother entire lesson for the students to have the next day. But is it possible to say, all right, this is what the students are doing in class today. Here's the work that I'm putting up on Canvas for them to be doing tomorrow when they're at home, almost like they're doing right now, but I think using that class time more bell to bell, and maybe not as much work time in the classroom as there might be if we were in school every single day. But that's a great question. Thank you.
If you do get a chance to talk to your staff, I think it'd be interesting for us to hear what they have to say. So I appreciate you answering that question. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Any others? Oh, Barb.
Yeah, and just another thought, that if it's work that they need to do independently at home, then the equity piece kind of comes in too, for kids who may not have support there or may not have people who are able to help them with the work. So we may want to consider even more that flip, where that's a video lesson at home and some work time in the classroom. Just something else to consider for,
Yeah, that's a good
so we don't create
idea.
a bigger gap.
Yeah, thank you. I think, as we talk about that's constantly on our mind. How do we meet the needs of our students on all areas of the spectrum when we're trying to do this? And as it has been in education, that has never been easy, but these times are proving that it is even more difficult.
I think we're ready for Wayne.
All right. Boy, I have a lot less to say because Mr. Vogler did an amazing job of explaining things because we are very similar. We've had conversations together, trying to work together with how can we function. Probably the biggest changes is the number of students in our building, and our cohorts are a little bit different just because we do have some blended classrooms of, say, juniors with seniors. So the cohorts would still be divided in half, so we would not have, I'll just use the number 1,200 for right now. We would have 600 students in our building at any one time, and we're trying to be very mindful to make sure that all the social distancing and PPE and all that's in place for our students. The challenge becomes passing times in our building, and as many of you have had the opportunity to now walk the new parts of our building, we need to increase passing time, which just in and of itself to get from one end of the building to the other end of the building with no one in the hallway takes roughly 4.5 minutes. And so we need to increase our passing time a little bit. So we're met with our staff, and our passing time is about 8 minutes, which would allow for proper dwell time for the Quat Stat 5 to sit on those touch points, whether it's desks or door handles or whatnot with our staff, and possibly start that a little bit early because some students won't have to travel the whole length of the building for sure, but want to allow that time for that dwell time and passing time. So that's probably the biggest change within our schedule. Staff have also come up with some great ideas, like Barb suggested, flip their classroom and maybe present the asynchronous work. That's the pre-learning, or, as Ryan suggested, maybe some of the post-learning, but doing some of that pre-learning work ahead of time, and now you show up to class and make that in-person time, really meaningful. Some of our staff have talked about that. As Mr. Vogler suggested, working with that group that you have in front of you is going to be really, really important, and spending that time with them. So we wouldn't want our staff to make 2 different lessons, as Mr. Vogler suggested. That really gets to be taxing, and really take advantage of that time. Now, some of our staff have said, well, could I have virtual at the same time? Ooh, maybe. That would be really hard, and we wouldn't expect that from our staff. But they too have been very creative of coming up with ideas. I think there's a lot of self-imposed pressure to cover all the content, and we need to be very mindful of this school is not like it was last year, and we may not be able to cover every single piece of content. That's hard to say, but given the parameters of how we're having to operate and still have high expectations. So, questions?
Questions? Doesn't look like it, so, oh, nope, she was just scratching her head, thank you. No questions so far.
Thank you, Mr. Vogler.
So, just a kind of closing comment with this, we keep continuously working on these plans, and we bring one forward, and we could be bringing a different one in another week. That's just kind of as we keep learning more. And with a lot of the schools opening recently too, we're getting in touch and asking questions, and many of our staff, I'm sure, are talking with their colleagues across districts as to what's working, what's not, and so on. And, like we mentioned, in the Harvard model, the prioritization, it could be a situation where some of our elementary students come back, and maybe even middle, but high school may remain virtual. In the Harvard model, it shows that in orange, that could be the possibility. So that's why we have to take all our factors into consideration when making those determinations. Okay, so I just have a couple more slides here. I wanted to talk briefly about closures, because this is a question I think that's been coming up quite frequently. So the district will closely monitor their positive cases, their close contacts, and the overall absentee rates due to illness, as it makes decisions related to intermittent closures of classes, cohorts, and schools. Classrooms and schools will move to virtual, so say we're in person, we would move to virtual learning for a period of time if a significant percentage of students are absent for COVID-19 or flu-like symptoms. The percentage that we're currently using is 20%, but it is still actually being evaluated in coordination with the Cross County Health Department. They actually have someone working specifically on this as of last week. Classrooms may also be closed as a result of a staffing shortage that prevents safe operations. Time needed for a deep clean, because we had a positive case in an area, or the inability to conduct contact tracing before the start of the following day. So it is definitely a new world we're living in, and these are things that could cause an intermittent closure. Then there are also many scenarios that may cause a change in the learning mode. The scenarios may involve one student or many students. So we could have an individual student who possesses symptoms or tests positive. They may have to quarantine. So a teacher might, give them some work, or might give them something virtually to do. Depends on the situation. After contact tracing, we may find we have to quarantine a class or cohort. There may be a situation where the COVID-19 risk level remains severe over a period of time, and we need to move to a more restrictive learning mode. In this scenario, we would hope to give at least 2 weeks notice. Because one of the questions I'm getting, well, if we're back in person and then our status shows red, do we switch right away? I think what we're saying is that we need to be cognizant of planning and time. but while also monitoring the trends as to why we have the measures in place. And lastly, the district could be directed to close due to an outbreak that would happen that would lead to a more restrictive learning environment. In this scenario, we may have to move to a different learning mode more quickly. They could ask us to close the next school day in a possible worst-case scenario. So when people ask me the question, well, how long before we would change? It really depends on the scenario in the situation, but these are some examples. And then lastly, notification of positive COVID-19 cases. That's another thing we're monitoring, and that will come into play as to the mode of learning that's happening and decisions we make in the district. Those that are directly impacted will be notified. This could be a few individuals, a cohort, or a building. We won't be sharing specific information about the individual due to the privacy and confidentiality. We want to be cognizant of that. And students and staff who were potentially exposed to COVID-19 will be notified immediately. Usually try to make the phone call, and if can't, also send an email because they have to ask some follow-up questions. And then individuals who are considered to be in close contact with the person who tested positive for COVID-19 will be required to self-quarantine as directed by the recommendations from our La Crosse County Health Department. So you can see how that's why that 6 feet of distancing is so important, and we keep emphasizing it in our district, because as long as we're staying 6 feet away and not around in a cumulative time together more than 15 minutes, you're able to not be known as that close contact. So really working hard on that. Okay. All right. Thanks for your patience through that presentation. Now, other questions you may have.
So I'm curious about questions. Brian?
I do have just one in terms of, do you know if all the hand washing stations in all the buildings have hot water?
I know that there is a work order in a couple locations to improve the temperature of the water. I do know that that's happening. In the meantime, what we ask of our staff is they ask their custodian or supervisor for hand sanitizer if they feel they need that, and we do have supply within all of our buildings.
Okay.
So, yep.
And then I guess the one last comment I would make is, as I'm listening to this and thinking, okay, so a teacher is planning for in-person instruction plus preparing students for flipped learning at home in the virtual, and then there could be the student or more that are quarantined. That I just am thinking that with the
No. So actually, we have to have more discussion with our staff on this, and they'll be having that. But when you think of the 20%, if you have a classroom of, say, 20 students, 20% is 4 students. So in a lot of cases, if you have a student who does test positive, the likelihood of other kids in the class being a close contact is possible, unless the students are remaining 6 feet that entirety of the day, and you can ensure that. So there could be scenarios where the whole class is quarantined and the teacher also, so they're just going to switch as a class to a virtual mode, so they aren't doing in-person and virtual and quarantining. They might have a couple students who would be in quarantine, and we do have kids in the past who go on a vacation and so on, and we have to prepare. The thing that's different is the quarantine is maybe a little longer period of time. So just, we're talking about a lot of different things right now and having discussions around, like, well, could a student Zoom in to a classroom and be watching the lesson if they're quarantined that long? Or, just trying to figure out. So right now, that's what they're talking about at different levels with their staff as to how can we make it, somewhat manageable, because we know it definitely is. We're asking a lot of our staff, and we want to ensure that we do the best to help guide them and listen and try and figure out what the best way to move forward is. So that's why you never know, we could come back with another plan. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Vogler.
I would say as well, this is something that Mr. Sackett and I have talked about. We just talked about this today. That's one of the reasons why we want to continue to meet with our staff and talk with them and say to them, okay, what might this look like? Let's talk about scenario A with this. How can we do that? How can you do that? What do you think you need in order to do that? What makes that feasible to be able to do that? Okay, now let's talk about this scenario that might happen. What do you think that might look like? What might you need in order to do that? And so that's the road that we're all walking down right now with them and trying to figure out, it seems like every time we put that plan together and we're like, oh yeah, this looks good. And then somebody else says, but then what happens if this takes place? So I think that's one of the reasons why we put this base plan together to say, all right, these are the ideas that we have. Now that we have this base together, what happens if this takes place? And it kind of throws it all off. And so that's why needing to continue to have those meetings with staff to say, okay, what do you think is feasible? What do we think we can change in order to make that happen?
Thank you. I think it's important to include staff input. And as a board member, I support that. So thank you.
Any others? Chris?
No.
Gary? Anita?
I do have one question.
Okay.
And I was taking notes as a good clerk should, and may have missed this, but I've had a couple people contact me about possibly the rumor of us going back on October 5th. Is that, can you address that, Chris?
Sure. Well, we'll make an announcement on the 30th at the latest date and time. With the way the metrics are trending right now, the likelihood to come back on October 5th would be very, very slim. We have always talked about October 12th as the date. So.
Yep, and that's what I thought, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rebecca, did you have any questions?
I just had a similar question. I just had a few phone calls in regards to athletics going on, occurring currently, and the students being virtual. They just had some questions or comments about that, what's going on in the sports.
So, for example, if our status would turn to red on Wednesday, then we will move to all virtual with our activities on Monday. And that's what we have committed to, so that's what would happen. Because part of our plan of easing back in was the sports, the majority of them take place outdoors, where our instruction is indoors, and it's with hundreds of kids, not just a group, a more smaller, manageable cohort size that our coaches are able to work with. But so yes, our plan in the district that Mark had shared was if we do go move, and with our athletics, we're able to, we're doing a weekly. So like this next week, we're going to watch and see what happens here on Wednesday. And if the status is using our metrics and our factors, it's not favorable, then Mark communicates with the coaches and they communicate with our families as to how we would be moving to virtual if that was the case. Yep.
Can you address the one of the suggestions or the concerns is because the vast majority of the cases are college students right now that we're seeing in La Crosse County. Can you address that? I know we've had conversations about that.
Well, what's happening is the college students just don't exist on the college campus. We actually have college students within our buildings. So the college students it's not like we are isolated from the transmission of the virus just because our students don't go to college. We have students that are friends with college. We have families that have siblings or children.
Campus, yeah.
And we have also people that actually live down in La Crosse in the area where some of this is happening. So, to really work as a community and together, we're asked and we work with the La Crosse County Health Department, and, And that's where, is it a close contact where that percentage is versus the community spread? That impacts the decision. That's one of our secondary measures. But right now, the close contact percentage isn't high enough for us to not say having these students up here or us traveling down even into the La Crosse area, that we aren't transmitting it through grocery shopping or going to the store or, so does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think you address the college students, that we actually have students in our buildings, but also that we've got families that work on campus, and we've got staff that live in La Crosse, and they travel to us on a daily basis, and so that, they may cross paths in Walmart, but that's not community spread, that's not considered, because they're not that 15 minutes or whatever, but there are other examples. I know it's hard. A couple weeks ago, people were starting to say that we should eliminate La Crosse from our consideration. At that time, the village of Holmen was red, because
Right.
a small number of cases can affect a smaller population much more than when it's spread out across the whole county, because I think the county was yellow at that time, and town of Onalaska was orange.
Yeah.
So it's hard to cherry pick those kind of statistics, and right now, that might be what they want to do, but 2 weeks from now, they might want to say, well, we should be looking at the whole county. So
Right.
I think we appreciate that we've identified what that metric is, and everybody then has that understanding, so they know where they're going. So I think the other thing, and I don't know that this is activities-wise, but it may be, is our staffing, when they're affected by those sorts of things. Do we have adequate staffing if one of our staff member has to be on quarantine for 2 weeks? Do we have plans in place to replace them, whether it's virtual, I guess, if they're not showing symptoms, they probably would still teach, but if it's in person, or if they are an advisor or a coach or something like that, do we have plans in place to
So
have substitutes for those folks, or?
So currently, we are working on, our first step is having a permanent sub available in every single building. That is partially staffed right now. We've been working, Melissa Cates has been working on that every day and has secured a permanent sub in a few of our locations and still working on that. So that way, we have that sub available every day. So we are almost positive we'll be able to use that sub every day. Then the second place we go to will be our substitute list in that we have available to us. And then right now we're working on some other options that we're hoping to have available and talking through those. Because we want to be cognizant of our staff, because if we do have a staff and they're willing to sub for another person, we want to be careful that, one, they're willing to do that, and two, we want to be careful that we'd rather keep our staffing within our building than inviting more people from the outside in, is I guess what you could say. So we're working on some other options for that at this point in time that we could be coming forward to the board with.
Okay. And then I know transparency is something we've talked about, and with the community, I know that if people are notified, I think you identified who will be notified if there are cases, but I saw that La Crosse had done kind of a summary, and it was in a way that HIPAA or identifying features, you wouldn't know. It just indicated that there were X number of cases within the district from this time period, kind of thing. And we'll be including that kind of on the metric when we put that out there on
Yeah, that will be
Wednesday?
within our weekly status update. I think it's important to know, for people to know, how many positive cases are we having within our district, because it really helps us in monitoring our staffing or our students or any of that may be happening. It really helps us in decision-making and just informing our public, because some people might think it's not here.
Yep. And I was going to say that. I think it's been very quiet, and I think the community may assume there's been no cases in the district.
So
And-
we'll be including that within
Yeah.
our status report. Yeah.
So any other questions? Well, that is it. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Again, just to reaffirm that the method of learning that you have on this is different than lacrosse's because they have different resources.
Correct.
And so that's what's been taken into consideration when we've identified the colors and what the method of learning will be.
Correct.
That those things also had been. So lacrosse may have something else, Salem may have a different
Correct. Yeah.
model kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
because that was another question
Yeah,
I
and
was
even
asked.
West Salem breaks it down 6-12. They don't even have it broken down by 6-8 and 9-12
Okay.
within their learning modes. And lacrosse I know they only have virtual in their orange just because of the resources that they have available versus us in Holmen. So
Don't
yes.
be surprised by that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then one last question as I think of it, because of the situation that we're in right now, and if an activity determined that it just, things, it just doesn't make sense to move forward, they still would have that option, right? To make that decision to go to Mark and say, this is the situation, it's changed since we started, we just can't see concluding, finishing the season or whatever. Is that something?
Any of those conversations should happen with the supervisor
Right.
in that, definitely, and they can talk with them through that. And like we say, every day is a new day, and we
Yeah.
learn something new every day during these times, and then we just have to adapt and be flexible as much as we can to provide what we can for our students, because our students are going through a time that many students will never experience in their life. So we got to do the best with what we have.
Yeah.
So
Barb has a question.
Yes, Chris.
Barb has a question.
Oh, Barb.
Oh.
Barb has a question. Yes.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify, just because it was said, lacrosse is actually going in person 4-5 in orange as well.
yeah. Thank you, Barb.
Okay. I think that is it, and I do appreciate I hope people I suggested to people to watch so that they understood this isn't necessarily a board decision. The administration comes to us and makes these recommendations on the metrics and what will result, and then the board, if we had concerns, we would be letting you know right now. And obviously, we really appreciate the I think, really well thought out plan. And when you put it all together, it makes sense. And we appreciate the thoughtfulness, because I know we want to caution on the side of safety for our students and our staff, and make sure that those things are taken into consideration. And education is right up there, but if they're not healthy, if they're not safe, then education can't happen. So thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Then moving on to consent agenda items. There are 7 items on the agenda this evening. I would, if anyone has any they'd like to have pulled out separately, otherwise I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Anita, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris, discussion on any of those? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Then board member reports and discussion. I'll call on you in order of the roll call, and if you have any comments to make, please share them. Anita?
Boy, like everybody, I'm just consumed with the COVID-19 preparedness and what it means for our district and what it means for the kids and the staff, and just listening tonight to all the information that was presented and everything that went into it. I'm just really heartened to know that we have the staff we have, and we have the leadership we have, and I'm very glad that the leadership is involving the staff in the decision-making too, and getting ideas like Ryan was alluding to, because that's not a cut to the leadership, but sometimes the staff, the people in the trenches do have some pretty darn good ideas. So I just wanted to say thank you to I've heard some comments, not many, just a couple from, different people, offhanded saying, trying to say it in a nice way that teachers must not have a lot to do now, since there's virtual learning,
I know.
and alluding to that teachers are lazy. And it takes everything within me to keep from just scissor kicking that person, because they have no idea the amount of work that goes into being an educator in a good year, on a good day. But for what they are doing now, they are so far above and beyond anything that they should be expected to supply to the kids in our district, but they do it. Because that's what they do. We are so fortunate, and we should be so grateful for the people we have. And I mean it from the staff all the way through the leadership and the kids. They're so resilient. So anyhow, those are my comments. I didn't mean to get carried away, but I'm so grateful for what we have. And I hope that everybody realizes we're in this together. This is not teachers wanting to stay home. This is not, leadership doing things, not involving people. We're all doing the best we can. And if we could all just cut each other a little bit of slack and know that we're doing it with the best of intentions to try to keep us healthy and get us through this pandemic, I think we'd all be a lot better off. And now I'm off my soapbox.
Thank you, Anita. Chris?
Nothing to follow that, nope.
Rebecca?
I just want to let everybody know, and all the teachers and everybody in the district, all the employees, that I think of you guys every day. I think of all the parents that have to juggle this. I can't imagine what everybody's going through, but I just want everybody to know that I think about you guys every day, and just hang in there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Barb?
Yeah, I think just that we all remember every day to be thankful for the things we can do and the things that our children can do, and to really keep our focus there, because I think it's really easy to go into what we can't do, and everyone can't do some things right now, and it's not a choice. I mean, we all would choose to do those things if it were safe. And then secondly, I just want to say a lot of parents have reached out with very serious concerns for their children with their mental health, especially some of the teens. And I just want to say, we as a board have tremendous compassion for you and for your children, and we want the best well-being for everyone. And please, to anyone in the community who's struggling with, mental health issues, please reach out for professional help when that's appropriate, and a lot of times it is, just because we do want everyone to be well. So.
Thank you, Barb. We do. Brian?
I would like to take a moment to thank our community partners who, during this closure, have stepped up to offer supervision of the children during the day, both the Y and the new BGC. I spend 30 to 60 minutes every evening listening to both my children, who fight over who gets to talk first, to tell me what the day was like at the BGC. They have done an incredible job. With anything new, there's just some troubleshooting that's going on, but the positive energy and messages that they come home with every night is amazing. And so I'm really proud that we have that in the community.
Thank you, Brian. And then Gary?
I'd just like to congratulate the Boys and Girls Club for that building. Took a spin through that thing, and that is really an awesome building. It's really organized well, and they really got under control. I kind of walked around that thing with my mouth open. It's a pretty nice building. I'm glad to see some of the kids back to working hard in the sports and athletic. They seem like they're really enthused, and I think they all really appreciate the opportunity to get back out there and do some work. And I too appreciate all the hard work done by the staff and everything they've done to keep the kids safe. And I just had one idea, and that is we have 3 people on the school board that work for other districts. It'd be nice to have them take 10 or 15 minutes on some board meeting and just let us know how it's going in their schools.
Yeah, we should. you want to do that now? Or we'll do it next meeting, how about that? And I think Anita retired, so.
I did hear it.
Well, shame on you.
I can get the lowdown from a few people lately.
You and I retired in the same year. That's just
Yeah.
ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, West Salem went back in person today, so
Oh.
it'll be interesting to get the lowdown from them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just echo everything you all have said. You've touched on it great. I was going to Mr. Vogler, you know, we get emails about school from teachers in the morning, early in the morning, and 9:58 last night, one of the teachers was grading assignments. So you see that, it's not just during that small time of day. And I know they're trying to track down students who may or may not have joined them or gotten homework in and all of that kind of stuff too. So you see that our staff are going above and beyond, and that, as Anita said, it's all our staff. I know we've had to make some adjustments with some of our programming, and it's going to be a little different this next year. We may not have gifted and talented, or talented and gifted in Holmen for the upcoming year in a couple of our buildings.
to
We
the
may have
extent.
administrators having to fill some of those gaps and some of those needs. It's just going to be a little different, and I think, as Barb said, we should just focus on what we are doing and what we're able to do. And I would just encourage our young people to, and our families, to follow the protocols, not only when they're on the field or running or in the volleyball court or that kind of thing, to do that at all times. Because what's happening on college campuses in La Crosse is exactly a result of students not taking those precautions outside of their classes. That, I guess that's what I believe is what's happening. And so it's really important for families, if they want to come back, they want their students to come back, for us as a community to take those precautions and to keep an eye on the goal, because that, having an outbreak in Holmen is going to set us back much further than having high numbers on college campus. I think, so just please consider that. I know families, as Rebecca mentioned, are juggling so much, and we do appreciate that, and that would be the best way to help us accommodate and get our students back in the schools, though, is to follow those safeguards. So I would just note that upcoming board meetings, we have a meeting on the 28th. October 6th is the WASB for Fall Regional, and are they doing it in person? It looks like they're doing it in person.
I think they're determining yet. but
Okay.
My guess is it will be a virtual meeting.
Sure. And then October 12th is our regular board meeting, and October 26th is our Super Monday, where we do the budget hearing, our annual meeting, and then a board meeting following it. So they're all in that one time, and we do start, make note, we start at 6 o'clock, and we sometimes go till 9, only because of how we schedule things, but I think we've learned, and so one meeting is gonna at the conclusion of another meeting, at the conclusion of another meeting. So we'll be able to get out earlier if that is how we process. So if there's nothing else to come before the board, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Anita, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, we are adjourned. Motion passes.
Good night.
Good night.
I like your hat.
Yeah, where did the hat go?